Hey everybody, Shaun here at Gamescom 2013, where I'm joined by Eric Osborne from Bungee, who is going to tell us a little bit about the massively exciting, highly anticipated upcoming game Destiny. I'm setting you up, man. I'm setting you up just a little bit. So I actually wanted to start by talking about sort of, the lore of this world, and it's something that I've kind of interested in right now because I saw a really interesting GDC talk yesterday from Jim Brown from not from Destiny, from Epic, who was talking about sort of like the two dominant schools of thought when it comes to storytelling in video games. On the one hand, you have the very tightly scripted, very kind of linear, cinematic heavy games at one end. And on the other hand, you have those big, open sandbox worlds that don't really care much about story at all. And he kind of proposed this middle ground where you create this fully fleshed out world with all sorts of lore and backstory, but you let the players go and find that for themselves. Does that, and to me, that kind of seems like what you guys are doing here with Destiny.
Yeah, I think it's always been a sort of philosophy at Bungie to sort of let the player drive the story, and those can happen in those minute-by-minute gameplay sessions, right? So, as you're out in the world and seeing objects, some architecture, or you look across like the demo and you see the graveyard of cars, it sort of begs questions like, what happened here? And how can I find out the answer? And sometimes it's about creating mystery and giving them things to sort of solve and feel competent about. And I think we're definitely going to do a lot of great cinematics with memorable characters, a rich storyline with great beginning and middle and end, but we also want to enable characters to tell their own stories, create their own characters, share stories with friends. That's super important for us. So I think there is a sweet spot. I think there's a lot of room in gaming as an interactive medium to do both, right? There are people that'll play all these different experiences, and it's just really cool to see people explore the space and push on both sides of the boundaries.
So I guess on the subject of like feeding players those little tidbits throughout the world, what are you guys doing to make sure that replaying various different missions, revisiting different areas are still fun the second, third, fourth time around? Because Destiny is a huge game, but people are going to want to replay it.
Yeah, so two of our big pillars on the design side are activities for every mood and something new to do every day. So we want to give players tons of reasons to come back in the world, and that might be replaying a cinematic chapter and tweaking some things that we're not quite talking about just yet, or going into a strike, or going back on the public event, playing a raid, playing competitive multiplayer, maybe just exploring and trying to gear up, going back to the tower, or chasing a certain weapon, a certain build, or a certain gear. Then we have a whole bunch of systems that we're not talking about right now that are purely about how do we make the world feel alive and give players reasons to go exploring, like what are they going to find out there when they go off the beaten path, or maybe they could earn a metaphorical or maybe even a literal treasure map in the world and see what's out there. So there's a bunch of things we can do to keep players playing, keep them happy, change the world, tweak it, give them a different look at it, give them a different look at an enemy. I mean, there's just so much fun space to play in. We're pre-alpha, we get to iterate on that stuff every day and see what really works and what really captivates us. So we're in a really fun space right now at our desks trying to figure out like how exactly, what's too much, how much is too frequent, what's the right amount of novel content, what's the sort of stuff that we can do that will surprise players, and what's the sort of things that they expect to be there all the time for them to go back to again and again.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like you guys have spent a lot of time talking about the fact that you want this to be a world that people want to spend time in. You want this to be a hopeful world. What is it about just the mood and the aesthetic of the Destiny universe that you want to draw people in with?
Well, I mean, there's the what and there's the why, right? We do it because like people have limited time they can spend with entertainment, and we don't want to put them in this sort of grim, dark, grotesque place. People are choosing to spend their time with us, and we want them to feel like they're in a world that's worthy of their time, that's worthy of its heroes. And so that's really important for us that we tell positive stories and every player is on the side of good, right? In terms of like what we're doing that, I think if you look at the art palette and you sort of look at even the post-apocalyptic images, right? The nasty stuff happened, and I'm going to go out there are more about not the terror that happened or the fall of civilization, but this reboot that you get, right? There's this world where you can go and leave your 9-to-5 job and become a hero and have fun with your friends, right? And tell these cool stories with one another in a place that you want to be in. So I think it's just super important and fundamental to what we do.
So how does the fact that you guys are approaching this as a 10-year project influence things? Because I was reading the Edge cover story recently where they made the interesting point that you guys can hint at things that you're not going to solve for another game or two, and you just kind of leave that lingering. So how does like
Yeah,
just the
sometimes
sheer
that's
scope.
like pure serendipity. That things just fall in the line, but sometimes they are definitely planned. We can have some foresight and understand what we're doing later on down the line. In the same space, we want to be really flexible. We want to ship the first game, see what people say, be able to react to it. Having a lot of runway is really helpful for our artists and engineers, people who are building the tools, because they can think longer term. Like, how do we build a really flexible technology pipeline that lets our artists do something 2 years from now that's really cool, and how can we change our production philosophies of like, hey, we have to build this experience every 3 years, and the things that just don't make the cut actually get cut and go away, as opposed to like, well, that doesn't have to go away. We can put that up to the side for a little while and bring it back later because we think it's a great idea. We just don't have the time to do it now. So absolutely step one is shipping an awesome game and making sure when we put it on the shelf for players that it's going to stand, we're going to earn those players. They've got a lot of choices out there for interactive entertainment, and we want to make sure it's awesome.
So you mentioned the idea of shipping the game, seeing what people think. That's not your only opportunity to see what people think. This is a pretty good opportunity to see what people think. So since you debuted the game back at E3 and you guys have teased it since then, what have you learned about Destiny that you guys didn't know when it was, inside Bungie? Like, what are the elements of the game that people are really interested in that you had no idea they would latch onto?
Well, one of the things that it's been a challenge to sort of really carve like a bright line for people to tell them what it is. Like when we came out, we had a lot of, we were saying a lot of things about the game that we were pretty sure were going to resonate with people, but it ended up being is this a shooter? Is this an action game? So we went to E3, we really wanted to demonstrate, like, yeah, this is what we do. This is our bread and butter. It's an action game. You're going to be powerful. You're going to face a bunch of really fun enemies that are worthy opponents that change every time you fight them. You're going to have an arsenal of great weapons. This is going to be fun. I think we've found that a lot of people are really gravitating towards the creating your character, like the ability to sort of go out into the world and tell your own story through the guns you're getting or the gear that you're putting on there. And we've even started doing some things on our website on Bungie.net since to sort of detail out some of those weapons because they have their own little cool stories, and they feel kind of small in comparison to the bigger sort of like, let's give you the big narrative of the world and set it up for you. But like giving them those little incremental bites of story in the gear that they wear has been really, really powerful as well.
Cool. So on the subject of, this being an action game, it seems like so much of the conversation about Destiny is, oh, it's a shooter, oh, it's a role-playing game, oh, it's a combination of those two. But watching that new Vidoc that you guys debuted here at Gamescom, I'm starting to see some influences popping up from other genres of video games, particularly in the reference to super attacks, which to me reminds me of fighting games in a way. I'd imagine you guys have people on staff who are fans of all types of genres, and that probably informs the direction, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We play a ton of games. We watch a bunch of movies. All these experiences sort of inform our preferences, and we have a lot of people working on the game, so you get a nice cross-section of people who are, playing hardcore MMOs down to, really light pocket experiences on the iPhone. Yeah. So, and board games like Magic, like there's just tons of influences coming in all the time. And the challenge is to sort of make something that feels new and unique, taking sort of our legacy, taking what we want to do with Destiny moving forward, and providing players something that feels really great, feels like a Bungie game, that's a shooter, it's an action game that you can understand, but then blurs and blends those lines a little bit and makes it feel really different and unique.
All right. One of the other things that kind of like piqued my interest during that Vidoc is, seeing those super attacks, the idea of different players playing as different classes, using different weapons, kind of combining their forces together. Like, what sort of potential is there in Destiny for players to use those kind of complementary skill sets to sort of...
There's actually a lot of potential, and when you look at something like a raid, it will actually demand that. Like players will have to create builds that are specifically for a challenge inside of a raid, and you'll have to have other players that are doing the same thing and teeing off of you and planning and strategizing. But even at the more fundamental level in the cooperative game, if you go back and watch that Vidoc through, I don't want to spoil it because there's a reveal we have coming up, but there are literal ways we are feeding those like stacking of supers between players and classes and helping them have really great cooperative experiences that just build and feed upon one another.
All right, Eric, well, thanks a lot for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.